I'm going to start this little chat I'm having with you with a Sanskrit sloka from ancient India, which is chanted before the beginning of any dialogue or talk. Many Indians, I'm sure, know this, but I wonder if how many people have thought about it and know what it means. Because even when you chant it, it sounds so nice. So when something is beautiful and nice, we sometimes don't look in to find out what it means. This is Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Now Shanti everybody knows, it means peace, peace, peace. So we begin with peace and we end with peace, and we hope there is peace in the middle. Now the sloka means Sahana Vavatu. You see, the word that occurs in all the three first verses is Saha. Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, which means, the word Saha means you and I. The ancient rishis discovered thousands of years ago that when there is a dialogue, the listener is as important as the speaker. So it's an exploration into consciousness, or an exploration into the truth, where you and I look at it together. This is so very important in a dialogue. If I talk and you listen, and it comes into the one ear and goes out to the other and you go home, well, it's a monologue. Nothing remarkable takes place. On the other hand, if you participate, if you and I together look at a problem. Now this is exactly what the great teachers of the Upanishad wanted. Look at it together, explore together, not accept something because somebody said so. Look at it, examine. And they have worked out practical ways and means to move forward and figure out what truth ultimately is, if it exists. So with this note, we will begin this talk. So I want it to be kind of a dialogue, but don't keep interrupting every 5 minutes. Then it cannot be a dialogue. It can only be a confusion. So I'll talk for a while, and then I'll leave it open to you to ask questions, preferably on the subject which we discussed. You are free to ask other questions, which, as long as it's not about software, which I know nothing about, we can work this out. Okay? So here we are in Google, which today is a capital letter G, which used to be for God once upon a time. Now it's Google, right? Why? Because you get all information out there. I always tell people you don't have to carry information in your head because you have Google. You go in and figure out from the search engine. It's a burden to carry unnecessary material in your head, because especially if you are seeking something new, something which is fresh, it's better to keep away all that you carry in your head. You don't need to nowadays. There was a time when you had to memorize and keep everything here. You don't need it. So use your mind to find out new things. So this leaves you free to look into this. Okay. So I'm going to start with one point, which is, people usually ask this question: what is this that you're seeking? Aren't you happy with this world? Some people don't seek anything. But I refuse to believe this. Everybody seeks. And what do we seek? Anybody in this world? Most of us, or probably all of us, we seek satisfaction, happiness, fulfillment, completeness. This is what we seek. Otherwise, this earth will come, the world will come to a grinding halt because we're not, you say, enough, I've finished seeking and it's over. But no, if I have $10 million, I want $100 million. If if I'm happy with somebody, I'm seeking somebody who can give me more happiness. Uh, if I'm satisfied with one thing, I'm looking for something else which might give me more satisfaction. Now, this is life. The movement towards expansion, to fulfillment, to greater happiness. This is what we all seek. Whether you seek it in philosophy or religion or in practical everyday life, this is what we seek. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, we don't seem to arrive at what we seek. Yeah, temporarily, yes. I say, for some time I'm fine, I'm happy. Then again the discord begins and I begin to seek something more. Sometimes I meet people and they introduce me and somebody to me and say, this is my girlfriend. I said, last time it was somebody else. Yeah, this time it. So by the time 6 people would have changed. So what are you looking at? More satisfaction, more happiness, more pleasure. This is what we seek. Now, the ancient teachers, in this case I'm talking about the rishis, they said, it's true that you seek happiness and everybody wants fulfillment. Everybody is looking for completeness, expansion. However, since you don't find it outside, have you even thought if you can find it inside you? Have you thought about this? In India, you might see a familiar scene. Under a tree, there sits a holy man or somebody who wears nothing more than a small piece of cloth. You might call him a fakir or whatever, with a begging bowl in his hand because his next meal he doesn't know where it comes from. He sits under a tree. But look at the expression on his face, full of joy. You might either think he's a holy man or a madman, one of these, doesn't matter. Holy men are often little mad. If sanity has brought us to this, I think it's better to go mad. Anyway, so here sits this man under a tree with a joyful expression on his face, and there are people lining up to see him and take his blessings. And if you look at the parking lot of the people who have come, there are BMWs, there are Mercs, there are silver ghosts, there are everything you can think of. So what are they seeking from this guy who just has a begging bowl in his hand? 2 things are clear. One is, even if they have all this, they haven't found peace and satisfaction. 2, this guy who has nothing has already found peace and satisfaction. That's what they're seeking from him. Of course, there are others who, in India it's very common. If you see a holy man, you go to him and say, please, I don't have children, give me some kids. Well, I don't have, my daughter is not married, get her married, and so on. But that's part of the game. But what are they seeking from this guy? The happiness and peace which he has arrived, they're wondering if it could come to them in some way. So, the ancient teachers said, this happiness that you seek and which you never seem to find in the end, which the end we have to go anyway. Please, I'm not painting a bleak picture of life, but it's a fact. Even if I make everything and keep it, at some point I have to leave it and go. So, if you don't find this completeness, permanency and satisfaction in the external world, have you thought about the idea that probably if you turn inward, you could find the fountain from which it springs? We have an example of a musk deer. A great saint, Kabir Das, once said, There is this musk deer which lives in the Himalayas. It's a very small structured deer, D-E-E-R, deer. And a particular season, it produces musk. You know musk. It's there in all the perfumes. Okay, I advise people not to use perfumes which have musk because they have to kill the deer to take the musk. Anyway, so in this deer, in that particular season when the musk comes out, it exudes a beautiful fragrance that spreads in the air. And the poor deer, D-E-E-R or D-E-A-R, doesn't matter. The poor deer goes all over the forest searching for the source of this beautiful fragrance, not realizing that it comes from a little pouch under its ass or tail or whatever. Right? It puts its snout into thorny bushes, gets bleeding, but it doesn't realize where it comes from, not knowing that it's from inside. So the ancient teaching of the Upanishads, the Vedanta is, and also the Sufis, is what you seek outside can be found inside, and what you find inside is complete. Once you touch that and understand the joy or the fountainhead from where happiness comes, then you lead a satisfied and peaceful life. It doesn't matter that you run away to the forest, or it doesn't mean that you stop working. If you give me the credit of having touched at least a bit of that, why am I still working? I should be sitting quietly at home. The thing is, when once you touch that, there is this incessant urge to share it with those who would want to have it. That makes you do work, but it's not for your profit. Right? Have I charged anything for this talk? No. So, this is important. Now, I look at it from another angle. It's always good to examine things from different angles. So this is the other angle. When I say that I am a very intelligent man, very rational man, I go only by my rational framework. I don't have blind beliefs. I will agree with something only if I feel that it fits into my rational system, which I have created over the years. Of course, it differs. When I was a little child, my rational framework was different because my inputs were less. As I grew up, my inputs increased. Therefore, my rational framework has also grown. Now it is in a different way. Maybe a few years later it would be something different. But I do have a rational framework which I use to judge things and whether I should accept it or not accept it, right? It's quite clear. I mean, it's required. I agree with this. Now the question is, on what is this rational framework based? All of us have 5 instruments of perception by which we perceive the outside world. All of us. Maybe Hindus, Muslims, Christians, it doesn't matter who. Black, white, man, woman, we have 5 senses with which we perceive this world. We have no idea what the world is except the picture provided to us by the 5 senses. We really don't know what something is. We only know what the picture that we get from our instruments of perception, which are the eyes, the ears, the nose, smell, touch. These are the 5 centers of perception. And all the data that we gather, based on which the mind manufactures the so-called rational framework, is from these 5 senses. Now the old teaching is that the perception of these 5 senses are at best limited and at the worst could be even illusory. And therefore the rational framework that we create based on the inputs from these five senses could go wrong. At best it could be imperfect, at the worst it could be just hallucinatory, illusion. How? Every day we see the sunrise, right? Every evening we see the sun set. Everybody sees this. But a high school boy would tell you, a high school student would tell you that the sun neither rises nor sets. It's the earth that moves. But what do we see? We see the sunrise, we see the sunset. So if seeing is believing, how much can we believe? And it is based on this imperfect data that we make or construct our so-called rational framework. The ear, let's say, take another sense organ, the ear. You ring a bell, the bell rings and then it reverberates. Slowly you hear it going away. You say, now the bell has stopped ringing, there is no sound. Believe me, the sound has not stopped. The sound has come to a frequency which your ears are not equipped to grasp. You have a dog whistle, the dog hears it, I don't. So my frequency is not adjusted. I can't say there is no sound, it is there. In fact, no sound that is made ever ends. But I can't grasp it because my hearing instrument doesn't grasp that frequency. This is the same with every other organs. And it is with these imperfect data that we create a rational framework. So it cannot be completely foolproof. That's all you can say. Now the great yogis, the great rishis, great teachers have said, apart from the five instruments of perception, the human system has other instruments of perception, which generally are latent, not active in most human beings, and which can be activated through certain procedures and a certain way of life. And when these are activated, then your data, what do you call it, your inputs increase and they become multidimensional because you have perfected those instruments in you which have larger areas of perception. So that framework of logic that you create after that would be quite different from what we have now, when we can only use our five senses. Now the whole process of spiritual practice or yogic practice or meditation, whatever you want to call it, is meant to activate these hidden centers of perception which are in us and which are generally not active in most people, but all people possess them. So this is the process to move towards activating those instruments of perception. In India, if you see the picture of one of the, in India we have 22 crores, millions of gods, not one, which means everything that is in nature is worshipped as divine. Nothing is excluded. Now, in that, you will find one particular deity who seems to be sitting cross-legged all the time with a snake on his neck, his eyes closed, and you see one little eye open here. In the Hindu pantheon, he is called Shiva, the yogi god. So many people ask, if he is God, who is he meditating upon? Now this Shiva is a symbol of the yogi who is activating centers of perception in all of us which are beyond the ordinary centers of perception. eyes are closed and something is open. Please, doesn't mean that you can open a center of perception by hitting a nail in through your forehead. I mean, don't get into this. I heard there are some people walking around with a hole in their head. This is dangerous. But it's a symbol that there are other instruments of perception in the human system which can be activated. Okay? So when this happens, then slowly you change. You become multidimensional. You get inputs which are normally not available to us. And when such a person talks about his experiences, you would either wonder if he's gone completely crazy or speaking the truth at all. So this is what I wanted to discuss with you to start with, that there are ways and means of awakening this. And throughout the history of religion and mysticism, different teachers have taught different ways of activating it. It will depend on the culture and the particular system or the particular background which you have, that the techniques may be little different, but they are still leading to understanding that which is beyond the grasp of the ordinary five senses. And I, as a young man, spent some years in the Himalayas with my master, and I think that he helped me to activate something. So I eat, drink, walk like you, but when my thought process is slightly different, because I see something wider than ordinary, something more than one can see. Okay? And you also realize that the less self-centered one is in one's life, the greater the possibility of opening up these centers, which is where morality comes into the picture. They didn't say, oh, don't kill, don't hurt, just because they felt like saying it. The fact is that the less self-centered one is, the less other-centered one, the more other-centered one is. When one is not living only for oneself but also for others, then there is a better possibility of getting these perceptions opened. Because then you're not thinking like an isolated individual, you're thinking as a whole, as everybody thinks. Everybody is included in this as humanity. And therefore, that which keeps you in touch with the universal truth is kind of stirring and opening up. Now, several teachers have said this openly. Some have not said it openly, depending on the system and the time where they lived. To give you an example, in the Bible, in the New Testament, there is a statement which I have gone around asking so many people. In Kerala, where I come from, in the south of India, we have, I think, as many churches as temples. Because they say that St. Thomas, a direct disciple of Jesus, companion of Jesus, went to Kerala and established a church there. I mean, not a church in the sense, established a center. So we have, even before Britain became Christian, we have Christians in Kerala. We call them the Orthodox Syrian Church. Their litany, which they chant, is still in a language called Aramaic, which is similar to the Syrian language, and this language which Jesus spoke. Aramaic. People might think he spoke in Hebrew. No, he spoke in Aramaic. So what I mean to say is we have as many churches as temples in Kerala, where I come from. So I have a chance to meet so many priests. So I've asked many of them. I went to a Christian college myself, college. Asked them, what did Jesus mean when he said, therefore, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Therefore, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. So usually they say you have to be one pointed, single eye. But I think that he meant that the organ of extra perception, which is called the third eye, if that opens, then your whole body is full of light. Now you think that all this is theory, so I want to tell you something else, which, if you have scientific minds, you'd think, oh, this is okay. I'm sure you have scientific minds. You're sitting in Google, right? So, since we are on the subject of the third eye and so on, which kind of looks mystical and out of this world, believe me, there are many pointers to it in this world and in this human structure. If you draw a line straight down from the middle of your forehead inside, and if you draw a line from the middle of the crown of your head down, when both meet, there's a part where there is an organ, there is a endocrine gland, one of the ductless glands in the human system, which is called the pineal gland. It's a very small organ shaped like a chili, and it doesn't have any duct. I mean, there are many ductless glands in the system, the endocrine system, and they are so important to the human system. For instance, the pituitary gland, which is very close to the pineal gland, is the master gland that controls so many of our functions, influences our thought processes, and so on. Then we have the thyroid, then we have the adrenal glands, there are many glands. Now the pineal gland, which is so small and which is somewhere in the midbrain, 60 years ago, scientists said that it was a vestige organ. You know what a vestige organ is? Useless organ, which has no use, like the appendicitis. 50 years ago, they suddenly began to discuss that the pineal gland has an important function to perform. And what's that function? It controls the circadian rhythm. You see, circadian rhythm is the rhythm of sleeping and waking. When you switch off the lights and everything is dark, then the pineal gland injects a little bit of melatonin into the bloodstream, and you feel very sleepy. Okay. Now, when you have a jet lag, what happens is your sleep-wake cycle, which is called the circadian cycle, is interfered with, which is why you don't, when you have a jet lag, you can't sleep because the time is changing and so on. So what do? You pop a tablet into your mouth, and it's called melatonin, same hormone produced by the pineal gland. It's not a good idea to do. I advise people don't take tablets because it's better that it comes back naturally after a few days. But we are in a hurry all the time, so we need to do something. So I can't sleep tomorrow when I should be awake, so I pop a pill. Anyway, that's not our subject. So the pineal gland today is considered to be a very important part of our sleep-wake cycle. 100 years ago, a great yogi who came to the West, one of the few who then came to the West, called Swami Vivekananda, said that the pineal gland perhaps could be the stem of the 1,000-petaled lotus. The yogis think that the area here, which is called the 1,000-petaled lotus, the Sahasrara Chakra, when that expands and blossoms, then man evolves from an ordinary being to a superhuman. And he said 100 years ago that perhaps the pineal gland forms the stem of the 1,000-petaled lotus. 50 years ago, the medical science begins to believe that it controls the sleep and wake cycle. Now, why this is interesting is because according to the yogic teachings and the Vedantic teachings, all living beings, especially human beings, go through three states of existence, which is common to all. One is the waking state. You know what is a waking state. I hope we are in waking state. And the next is the dream state. And we all know what a dream state is. You dream wonderful things which you can't really see when you're not dreaming. You're not awake. But then when you're dreaming, you will definitely not believe that you're dreaming. It's only when you wake up that you know that this is a dream. Right? Generally. There are rare instances, but generally, when you wake up, you say, oh my God, what a dream. But when you are actually dreaming, it's very real. It's not a dream. So somebody once, ancient sage, asked, what happens if you suddenly wake up and look at life and say, what a long dream I had. If you say that now, you wouldn't believe it because you're actually in it, right? Like you are in a dream. You'll never say, I'm dreaming. But when you come out, that's a dream. So what happens, suppose there is a click and suddenly you wake up as if and say, my God, terrible dream. Or a good dream, depends on how your husband or wife is. Or your girlfriend, whatever. So we have the waking state and we have the dream state and then we have deep sleep. Dreamless deep sleep. And in deep sleep it's so beautiful because, and you get so much rest because you don't even know who you are. In deep sleep you don't say, I'm so and so. That guy didn't recognize me, so I'm upset. Nobody. You don't know who you are. You have no awareness of yourself. Everything is gone. There is no outer cognition. There is no internal cognition. Therefore you rest, because you are not there. The best way to rest is give yourself out. Too much of me, no rest, stress. So in deep sleep there is nothing. You don't know whether you exist, so you are fully. But something seems to be there even in deep sleep, which is aware of this wonderful rest. Not at that point. When you wake up, you remember it. When you wake up, you say, that was a blissful sleep. So something was enjoying the bliss. That point you didn't know, but when you woke up, yeah, that was blissful. So the great Vedantic teaching says there is another state apart from waking, dream and deep sleep, which is called Turiya. And that is the state which cannot be described very easily. It is something like, suppose while you were in deep sleep, you became aware of it. Normally we are not aware of it. We are aware that we had a restful sleep when you wake up. But while you are still in deep sleep, you are not aware. What if there is some way or something which recognizes or becomes aware of that pure dreamless sleep? That's called Turiya. Unfortunately, you cannot reach that by sleeping. That would have been nice. Sleep and get into Turiya. No? So, now why I mention this is because if the pineal gland is to do with deep sleep, who knows, it might have something to do with the next state called Turiya. I said who knows because we are looking at it. I think it is so. In the same way, this body has many psychic centers in it, which can be through different methods awakened, and when these are awakened, then one gets into the understanding of what lies beyond the world of the senses. So the consciousness expands. And if you ask me what does it go finally, nobody has an answer because there is no end to it. It's like the Milky Way, there is no end. You can't say it stops here. However, since that is much more satisfying and blissful than the ordinary world. You live a peaceful life here. You don't want to attain the happiness of this world even if it means murdering somebody, because you already found it inside. Right? And now, after saying this, I rest my argument, discussion. Okay? Now it's for us to discuss it. So if you have something to ask me, please do. But not all together, but one by one, as many as we are here. Yes.
You mentioned the methods and means. Can you please talk more about what are the methods and means which people who live in this kind of settings can follow and do? The second part of that is, once you are on that path, what kind of signs or traps look for that you're progressing or not progressing? Thank you.
Okay. The question was, if you hadn't heard it, that I had mentioned that there are means, ways and means to awaken this sense, extrasensory, whatever, perception. And if there is, how do we go about it? And once you are on it, how do you know that you are progressing? Right? That was the question. Now, there are ways and means of awakening it. Unfortunately, there are no shortcuts. Well, there is a shortcut, but it's a very difficult cut. It is to cut your ego into two. Now, this is very difficult. It's not so easy. So, we have to follow step by step. Okay? Now, the step by step simply means first to learn to bring your mind, which is always extrovert, which is outside, moving outside, turn and come within. The first step. Now, to get it to turn inside, the mind never likes to remain in a vacuum. You can't keep mind away from thought, because mind is thought. Can you conceive of a mind without thought? It's not possible. So all you can do is to engage the mind, which is usually engaged outside, in some process inside. That's the first step to move within. And one of the best things to do, because the mind cannot stay without an occupation. If there is no external occupation, it would seek an internal occupation. So keep it occupied with your breath. Now, in all the great teachings throughout the world, there is a great deal of stress laid on what is called breath work. We all breathe. We can live without food sometime. We can live without water for some time. We can't live without breathing for a minute, half a minute. Finished. So, breath is so important to us. And yet, we don't pay any attention to breath, because it's easily it comes. You don't have to pay anything for breathing. So you just don't care. When you are in the womb, it starts, and when it ends, you're dead. But it's so important. And we are saying that the breath is the link to your inner consciousness. And therefore, the first step is to turn your mind and occupy it in your breath, in your breathing patterns. There are different ways of doing it, but to put it very simply, when you breathe in and when you breathe out, give complete attention to your inhalation and exhalation, which we normally don't do. Not all the time, but when you sit down somewhere every day, say, I'm going to sit here for half an hour. Even if the roof falls, don't call me. Sit down, put a board outside. And then give complete attention to your breath as you breathe in and as you breathe out. When you inhale and when you exhale, give total attention to it. And in some disciplines, we also chant a certain sound, not required. You can just breathe in and watch your breath and mentally say Om. You can breathe out and watch your breath and again say one Om. And keep doing it for a few minutes. Let's say 10 minutes. Now this is something which you can experiment and find out when you go home. Sit down and do it for some time. You'll see that first many of the extraneous thoughts which disturb you are out and you are just engaged with the breath. When you are engaged with the breath, you will realize that it is a very blissful feeling, very happy feeling. So you would want to come back to it again and again. So you start with that first. It's a good thing to start. Because you start with that, you don't have to, you are not obliged to me in any way. Okay? You don't have to call me your guru or anything of that kind. Just stay inside. You're your own guru. You don't have to. Just stay and watch your breath and let it settle down and see how you enjoy it. And then when you once experience that quietness and beauty of it, you will want to come back to it again and again. Start it. So, the second question, how do we know that I am progressing? One is that you are able to sit every day quietly at least for 15 minutes. One sign. The other is anybody who does this after a while will begin to be less angry, less aggressive. He would let others pass when he overtakes, when you're driving. The mind calms down, but you would say, no, how can I survive in this aggressive world? Wrong. In fact, the world would become a better place with more people becoming peaceful. And if you do it for 6 months, I guarantee that your attention span will also increase. You will be able to fix your attention on anything that you want. And you will also become more sensitive, that you might begin to hear the chirping of the birds which you never gave any attention to before. Like that. The rest, please practice and watch yourself and see what else is happening. I leave it to you to decide. Welcome.
Thank you for the talk. Would you be able to share when was the first time that you experienced these extrasensory experiences? A little bit on that.
Sure. When I was in college, 17 years, 18 years old, there used to be a lady living in the southern end of India called Kanyakumari. When the great Spanish Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama came to India, he called it Cape Comorin, the Kanyakumari. So there used to live a lady there who was mistaken by many people to be a mad woman. Used to wander around the beach and live with dogs around her. Her only friends were dogs. There were many dogs around her. And the dogs won't let you go near her unless they figured out that you're a friendly guy. And she was most time naked. So probably a pioneer of nudist society. She was out there. I am talking about the time when I was 17 years old. I'm 68 now. When she lived there in the beach, and some people suspected that she might be a advanced yogi. So I, with my friend, went there many times, couple of times. And once when I went there, she kind of touched me on my forehead and on the head with her hands. I felt nothing at that time. I came back home. And that night I had a very vivid dream. This happened in the dream, but it also flowed into my waking state. I'll tell you that later. I came back, I had a dream. In the dream, I was dressed like a yogi, wearing just a little loin cloth and sitting cross-legged in Buddha posture. We call it Padmasana. Under a tree somewhere, and there were 4 roads coming out from there, like a junction, and the tree was in the center. And then I look around, and from one of those little paths comes this lady, but she looks very tall in the dream, and she has something in her hand, a stick in her hand, yeah, and she comes. And then I see her standing before me, and I feel bad that probably she's hungry, so I have to give her some food. So in the dream, of course. So I look around, and somewhere in my loin cloth I find a small little aluminium white tube, inside which there are few grains of rice. So I open it and give her the grains of rice, and she takes the tube from me and presses it in my forehead again tightly. This is a dream, okay? And then I feel a kind of blissful sensation all over my body. But then I wake up from the dream. Now this is important. I wake up from the dream, but the blissful sensation has not gone. If it was just a dream, it should have disappeared with the dream. I could still feel starting from here, my whole body in a kind of very blissful state. And it was as if I wanted to go and hug everybody. I mean, that everyone is part of me. It was a very blissful experience which I have never had before. If you try to define it, I would say it was like something like a sexual ecstasy, but 100 times more than that, and not located in any physical organ. Let's put it that way. Over the body throughout. And it remained with me for the whole day till evening. This was my actual first experience of expansion and feeling out, not just centered in the body but around. Since you asked me, I'm saying this. Nobody asked me before. So many years, I'm 68 years old. Nobody asked me this question. Can you imagine? It happens.
What is it, and it actually you jogged my memory from that experience. What is it, what is that, what is it called when you have an experience where you look out, I had an experience that lasted about a month where I looked out into the world, and no matter who I saw, no matter what their situation, no matter what they looked like, I only felt like a very profound love for them. And I could see the beauty and the story that they had that brought them to the state they were in. What is that?
I think it is an unconscious and spontaneous expansion of consciousness. But did it remain forever or did it go away?
Well, it was interesting because it lasted for about a month, which was amazing, and I had a great month. But then after that, after it was over, there was a lot of turmoil in my life. You know, lots and lots of turmoil. I didn't suffer personally, but it seemed that there was a lot of turmoil.
Now this is another thing, since you have said this. Much of these experiences are either there is turmoil before or after. Because it's only when you go through turmoil that you will be able to stabilize the experience. But we get distracted. I'm not saying that everybody will have turmoil, that's not what I mean. But in many instances I've seen, sometimes this happens after a great turmoil and a churning that goes on inside, and one day, gone. Sometimes it happens when you're experiencing this wonderful feeling, and then comes the turmoil. Now, if you were guided by a proper real teacher who is with you, he would have, or she would have, taught you how to handle this turmoil so that it doesn't get into and interfere with that feeling. It's surely an expansion of consciousness, but it just happened automatically. It happens like that to some people. But that's not the end of it, okay?
Right.
It's the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually in the middle of yoga teacher training when it happened.
So the lady was the first person to give you the spiritual
Haha,
experience.
what?
The lady was the first person to give you the spiritual experience. Why haven't you chosen her as the guru? And
What?
why did you go to
What is that? Say that again.
So if the lady was the first person to give you the spiritual experience, why haven't you chosen her as the guru?
Haven't I?
Chosen her as the guru.
Because she was not my guru. She was just an initiator of the process. I needed to have proper guidance and go step by step. So I found somebody who was ready to do that to me. And this lady especially, this kind of people who look like mad, who call avadutas, they are not people who teach you step by step on how to get there. They might give you some experience, but they can't. They, they don't. So even if you had such an experience, you need to find somebody who can guide you step by step.
To follow into that question, how does one decide or sense between potential guru and a potential disciple whether that relationship is meant to be as guru and disciple?
For this, I have people ask me this very often. One of the things I want to tell you is don't be in a hurry to choose a guide. Okay? You don't have to be in a hurry to choose a disciple or a guide. And it is the guru who chooses the disciple, not the other way around. You can't choose somebody. I mean, you might think you have chosen somebody, but if it is serious, then that teacher has already chosen you to be your disciple. This is one thing. The other is, be with such a person under different circumstances for some time before you decide, okay, this is my cup of tea. Because it is quite possible that the guru may be good, the disciple may be good, but this is not your cup of tea. Maybe you have to look somewhere else. This is possible. If that is possible, then if it is really a sincere guru, he would advise you, look, this is not, you're not, go somewhere else. Because I think a true spiritual teacher is not in the business of expanding his clientele. The less the better, actually. So you can handle it properly. Right? So if you find anybody who is holding on to you and say, don't go anywhere, avoid. And be with a person, see him under all circumstances before you decide. And the important criteria is, if you follow instructions, are you able to tune in with your inner self in some way? If you cannot, then you need to re-examine it once more. Last of all, last but not the least, check if the guru wants your money or wants to give you something. Especially in Kali Yuga, it's very important. In this age, if the first thing he asks you, how much can you pay, then avoid. Better buy a house with the money.
In your book, you had mentioned the pain you had gone through before you met Babaji and what you went through when you met him. Could you describe both the situations? You went through extreme pain.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, could you?
Yeah, the pain was because the age of 19 I left home and I went off to the Himalayas. I felt like I was a caged bird and I wanted to break free and get out. So I went. I knew I was looking for somebody or something, but I didn't know exactly what. But the Himalayas beckoned, so I went. And of course, deep down in my mind, I felt somebody might be there to guide me. I was discouraged in various places by people who I thought are responsible people. So I felt dejected. In Badrinath, when I was told by the chief priest of the Badrinarayan temple that there are no such gurus or yogis, they are all fakes, they are just people who smoke ganja. You don't waste your time, you're a young educated man, go home. You can imagine a person has invested everything in his wandering life and then somebody says it's useless, it's all nothing, there's no such thing. You've already burnt your bridges. You don't want to go back. And you can't go forward because they say it's an illusion. So what do? I actually contemplated suicide. I thought maybe maybe if there is a next birth, I'll come back in a more suitable body. Maybe that's why I can't find somebody. And that was the pain. And I thought either I find a teacher or I end my life. So I was actually planning to jump into the river, into the Ganga. In Badri, if you look at the river, the Alaknanda flows with such force that I still had a practical mind. I was wondering how many minutes would it take to take it. And and then I decided, let me go and sit in Vyasagufa cave and meditate for a while before I decide what I have to do. So that's when I found him. And the first sentence that he said to me was, so you have finished your window shopping and come to me. And he didn't use these words, but kind of, he said, "Ghum phir ke hamare paas pahunch gaye." So, and then I said to him that I won't leave you forever, and he laughed. And he said, "We'll think about it." He said, "Dekha jayega," he said. So it was like that. And then when he decided that he was personally becoming a barrier to my advancement, he threw me out. And when he threw me out, that was also very painful. It took me time to adjust to it. There are other instances of this. The great Jain, there's a Jain system of thought in India, very ancient, the Jain religion. One of the great teachers, the last Tirthankara of the Jains was Mahavira. He had a disciple called Gautama. Gautama could not attain the highest level of spiritual consciousness, which is, and the Jains call it Nirvana, so also do the Buddhists, because he was too attached to the master. So he attained Nirvana when the master died. In the same way, my teacher, Maheshwarnath Babaji, suddenly decided that I was getting too attached to him personally. So one day he dropped a bomb and said, "Get out." So I walked out, of course, but that was quite painful. He called me back, that's a different story. But so the lesson is, don't get too attached to the teacher. Get more involved in the teaching, what is being taught, rather than the persona. Get what I mean? Sometimes I tell my friends when we gather together, are you here to listen to the teachings or because I have a long nose? What is it?
backyard of your house and did that, right? So that guru is different from who you met in Himalaya.
I'll tell you, but I have a suggestion that you read the autobiography once more carefully. In my autobiography, I have mentioned that when I was 8 years old, I met somebody in the backyard of my house. But the meeting was only for 5 or 10 minutes at the most. And nothing happened except that he blessed me and walked away. And then at the age of 19, when I went to the Himalayas, and after this, what I discussed, met him in the cave, he was the same person. But that was a 10-minute encounter. This was a 3.5 years encounter with the same person. But I didn't know, of course, that I was going to meet the same person when I started out.
Is it possible for anybody who does yoga to achieve at least a glimpse of what you have seen in this lifetime?
Sir, I personally feel that anybody who applies himself to this as seriously as he would apply himself to making money, for instance, will certainly have some glimpse of this. You know, this great saint Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say, was Swami Vivekananda's guru, he used to say that we shed pots of tears for money, for wife, for children, for shed one tear for God and he is before you. When he said God, he was referring to the expansion of consciousness, of course. So if one is serious and if that becomes a very important part of one's life, not a hobby, then I'm sure that some glimpse will certainly be possible. Otherwise it's unfair. Only some special people can find it.
Can this be self-taught, or would you advise that having a guru guidance be the best way to
Self-taught, it's like this. Suppose you are serious about this exploration. Suppose I say, okay, I've listened, I've heard so much, I've read so much. Now I have to practically step into this. I need to explore. Suppose this thought occurs to you very seriously. First, of course, you can't find suddenly a teacher. So it's better you don't find one. He might be false, who knows. So look at the teachings from the books which have come. Read them and try to do like today I discussed a breathing technique with a friend, Mr. Kimka. So you start doing it slowly, little by little. And when there is a need, this is a spiritual law, when there is a need of a personal guide, have no doubt that somebody will appear from somewhere. We don't have to run around. I went to the Himalayas. There are various reasons why I did that. But it doesn't mean everybody has to run to the Himalayas to find the teacher. In fact, a teacher may be quite close to you and you wouldn't even know there is a teacher around. And if you are serious, then the instruction will start. Now, since we are on the subject, I want to tell you a beautiful little story. I think if some 5 minutes, okay? If we are still in the waking state. This is a Sufi story. It's a Sufi story. There was this gentleman from the Middle East who grew up, who came from a very poor background, and he wanted to become a rich man. So in the Middle East, when you say you're a rich man, it means you have a caravan and you're doing business. That's what it means. He also had this childhood inclination towards the spiritual life. But in his desire for becoming rich, this was put on the back burner. So he became a rich man. When he turned 55, he decided, I've become as rich as I can. This is all that money can buy. I can't buy anything more with this. No more happiness can be bought. So let me go back to my interest in childhood on spiritual matters. So probably the satisfaction is there, which I have missed. So I go back there. So what he did was, he distributed all his wealth among his children, kept a little bit of money to build himself a small cottage in an oasis somewhere. In the desert, the oases come by very rarely, so he found a place. He built a small house, and meanwhile during his life he had collected a lot of books, a lot of literature. So he got all those things, took them to his house, and decided to stay there in isolation and spend all his life in the spiritual pursuit. Now, having become a rich man, he had even forgotten how to make a cup of tea, because he had so many servants running around the house. That was when he went to the village and found a guy who said, I can cook for you. So he took him along. So both of them lived together in this little cottage in the oasis. 7 years he lived there, reading his books, meditating. After 7 years, it occurred to him that this particular thing which I am seeking needs a teacher, a guide. I can't do it by myself. So he started looking for a guide in the deserts. In those days in the deserts, there used to live mystics practicing their things. So he met many people and he was not satisfied. One day he saw a guy with a very flowing beard, and you know how we get carried away by flowing beards. Flowing beard and a turban on his head and so on, coming along. So he went to him and he bowed down to him and he said, Sir, I think you are a great spiritual guru, so can you accept me as a disciple? Now this man said, you might think I am a guru. First of all, how do you know I am a great man? And second, you have decided that you want to become. I haven't decided I want to make you my disciple. Even if I decide, I can't make you my disciple without asking my guru, my teacher. In the Middle Eastern terminology, my sheikh. So he said, then why don't you do that and accept me? He said, therein lies the problem. It's 7 years since my guru has disappeared. I can't find him anywhere. If I find him, I will ask him, and then I will accept you as my disciple, if he agrees. So he said, but where is he? He said, I don't know, he must be somewhere in the desert. I am searching for him. He said, sir, can I help you to search for him? He said, sure, help me. So he said, then give me a description. So he said, well, he's a short man, usually doesn't wear an upper garment, has a white, just ties a colored cloth around his waist, has a towel on his shoulders, but he's a good cook. Good cook. The description looks like my cook in the cottage who has been with me for 7 years. So he said, sir, can you come to my house? He said, sure. So they went there, and the story is that the kitchen door opened and the cook walked out, and this man prostrated before him and said, oh my Sheikh, where have you been? Disappeared. So he said, I have been with this guy for 7 years. He said, but he is still looking for a teacher. He said, it took me 7 years to drill it into his head that he, that he needs a teacher. And now that he has understood, you please take care of him because I have other work to do, and walked out of the house. So how do you find a guru? He could be the cook in your house or the security man standing outside. You never know. It's not external. It's internal. You hear what I mean? So when you see people who are pretending to be gurus with all the paraphernalia, escape. Get out. Thank you.